Homer led the league in tackles with 85. The deep ball for Darius Prince, and Philadelphia's on the board first.
On the draw, this is Bryson Allen. And Allen weaving his way all the way down to the 22. 10-yard line, 5. Mayfield, Dancy, all around. Throw as far as he can throw it. Jump ball coming. Crazy stuff. Not this time.
And you want to be a wide receiver, you're going to have to take a little bit of a hit like that as Brown got him in that shoulder, but watch. Those are teeth.
Do we have a dentist on staff here?
All right. It's been a long time coming, but we are back with another episode of Around the Football World, and there is a lot to unpack today. TJ, how are you doing this morning, man?
Just another great day. How are you, Sam?
Can't complain at all. It's always a good day when you get to talk some arena football, indoor football. Just to clarify, there are two different styles of rules here. Everybody likes to remind me of that every time I call it arena football. But yeah, anyway, we can go ahead and jump right into this. I mean, we're going to talk about a couple different subjects today. We've got the IFL has lost some teams. The NAL has, a couple big pieces of news coming out. They've got their schedule released now. IFL's got their schedule out. AF1 just released their schedule. TAL has some big news as well, moving to 7-man football, which is interesting after last season. So we really kind of can get into this and have some fun today. So where do you want to start, man?
Hey, you want to start with the schedule release?
Sounds good to me. I just have this handy graphic we can pull up right there. So, we'll go ahead and jump right into the schedule release. And, the AF1, as we all know, announced their schedule. I think it was Tuesday. Pretty big announcement. We were very lucky to have the announcement here on Shady Sports Network. If you did not catch that, I strongly recommend going back and watching it. They had Jeff Fisher on. They had multiple other league people on, including Jerry Kurz, Gary Compton. And then I feel like I'm blanking one other person that was on there, but I could be wrong. But it was a great event. It was really cool to be able to be a part of that. And then we also had some interviews here on the network after that as well. Wanted to shout out, Rebound Off the Net, AF1 Fan Zone, Off the Wall, Arena Football Insider. I mean, they literally got everybody involved in this and had interviews with multiple league personnel across the media world that were able to get some interviews in, which I thought was a really cool way to go about this. But, without further ado, with me just rambling here, TJ, what sticks out to you about this schedule here?
Well, the first thing, or the biggest thing, at least for me, would be the Outlaws. Coming in, you can say loosely, as the defending champs. They do not have a home game until week 6. Luckily, in those first couple weeks, there is a bye, so they don't have 5 true away games, but still 4 away games to start off the season, basically on the lighter side of halfway through the season before they even get a home game. That's the negative side, though. On the positive side, you figure the home run stretch, they go all the way down. They have 6 home games and only 2 away games. So early disadvantage, but later in the season, when the playoff push comes, they will have the advantage at least.
Completely agree. I mean, honestly, if you're a team that has a very strong desire and a belief that you will be in the playoffs, you want those home games at the tail end of the season. You know, that, like you said, that's a huge advantage for them when it comes down to the home run stretch there. And I think it's honestly going to end up paying off dividends, huge dividends here at the end of the season for them. It's one of those things where, you know, you can't, in indoor football, you're never the immediate priority for your arenas. There's always stuff going on that you kind of have to work around. And I mean, it's one of the kind of, I don't want to say ugly, but one of the realities of being an arena football team. You know, you might be live sports and you might be super exciting, but at the end of the day, the arena is going to bring in, you know, the bigger drawing events, which sometimes are, you know, concerts, you know, hockey, like all these other events that kind of unfortunately trump AF1 or any other league for that matter. So hopefully we can kind of get past that as the AF1 continues to grow, but the Outlaws are definitely kind of seeing the negative effects of that. One of the things that really stuck out to me, and if you look at these schedules, it happens to a lot of different teams, but particularly with Southwest Kansas, if you look, they play Wichita and Wichita, Salina, Wilkes-Barre, Corpus Christi, Albany, Wichita, Salina, Arizona, Corpus Christi. So they have 6 of their games where their opponents are back-to-back. And some might think that's not necessarily a bad thing. Some might think it's a little bit of an advantage to, you know, those games because you can really kind of study those opponents and really kind of lock in what you think they're going to do. But at the same time, you also have to game plan accordingly. So it might be a scenario where you have to game plan for the same opponent back to back multiple times throughout the season, which granted, the way they decided to do the divisions and the scheduling with 3 games or potentially 3 games against each opponent within your division, that definitely kind of ties their hands a little bit, given that they have to kind of schedule those games throughout. But yeah, I did find that really interesting to see overall. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
It is different, that's for sure. You know, the Storm, you know, then it's ironic because then later in the year they also face Salina and Wichita back to back then again, you know. But yeah, it'll actually be interesting to see those, you know, series, if you will, unfold because, you know, you face them back to back right off the bat to start the season, and then you go probably about 2 months or so into the season, and then you have the third matchup with each one. So it'll be interesting to see what each team takes from those first 2 back-to-backs. And it might be, you know, for a 3-0 sweep in the season series, or it might be the wins, you know, with the 2-1 advantage in the series that could help them with the playoff push.
Guess it would help if I unmuted my mic. So I agree. It's one of those things that could really kind of go either way, in my personal opinion. I mean, it could be a scenario where you get into it and you hate it at first, but then it ultimately ends up becoming an advantage because, like I said, you can focus in on those opponents early on in the season. But one thing that kind of came out of this whole thing that, you know, it was kind of late in the announcement process for expansion was the fact that Corpus Christi jumped over. And I think that actually is another kind of, I don't want to say advantage, but it's another situation that I think benefits those teams in Kansas. You know, if you look at the division, you have Southwest Kansas, Wichita, Salina, all within like a few hour drive of each other. So, you know, you look at some of these away games for these teams, and they're realistically only traveling a couple hours, which, I mean, isn't necessarily a huge thing at the end of the day, but it is also a very huge thing at the end of the day. So, you know, some of these other teams are traveling, you know, all the way up and down the coast, like Albany here. You look at the beginning of the season, they've got Orlando. So, I mean, immediately right out of the gate, you're traveling all the way down to Orlando, Florida, and then you have to go back home immediately in the next week right back up to the north end of the coast, and then you have a bye. So I mean that's kind of an interesting thing that kind of has unfolded. Bringing in Corpus Christi, you give another team that's not that far away from Kansas. So I mean realistically, from a travel aspect, I think that's going to be very beneficial to some of these ownerships from the smaller towns out there in Kansas. So I think that's a good thing, and in terms of financial backing, I mean, at the end of the day, anytime you have to fly, that's a more expensive trip than it is when you can take your team bus. So I mean, that's definitely something that I think is going to ultimately unfold and be a good thing for those teams. And then I like how the divisions kind of broke out, which we haven't really talked about yet. You've got Albany, Orlando, Nashville. Who am I blanking there? Wilkes-Barre. And then you'll have Wichita, Salina, Southwest Kansas, Corpus Christi, Oregon, Billings, Washington, and Arizona. So I think, realistically, if you're looking divisionally, that Kansas division, the Central Division, really has some advantages in their travel. But then also at the same time, I think all of the divisions broke out to where it's fairly even travel wise, and I think that's going to be a good thing. You have a lot more experience with that travel aspect of things, given that you were an NAL coach for a while there. So I mean, how important is it that you don't have a lot of those really long trips to games before you have to play an opponent?
It makes a world of a difference. For starters, arena football, indoor football, it's different from the NFL. Most of these guys, if not all these guys, have day jobs. So the further away games, they can't always guaranteed make. So you can go into an away game, like if you're Albany going all the way to Orlando, and, two of your starters can't take the time off work, from their day job. So now you're down two starters just like that, and then you also have to factor in, are you going, how are you traveling? You have the means to buy a plane ticket, or are you traveling cross country on basically a tour bus? Because then that has a way to wear on you, if you're on a bus for 12 hours or something insane like that. So it makes a huge difference. The close traveling proximities is definitely a huge plus, not just for the league and expenses, but also the individual teams and player availability as well. And it also help, in my opinion, bring an overall better product to the field come game time.
I agree wholeheartedly. And actually, one of the things that I really liked is despite the fact that we have these divisional setups where you're going to be playing, 3 different teams, like a total of roughly like 9 times, you also have these out of conference or out of division games that I think are going to be awesome. I mean, you look at it, and Salina, they play, Oregon. They also play Albany, and where am I missing their other game? Billings. So you get that division, that rivalry with Billings, which has been growing from the CIF days all the way up to today, so basically the last 4 years. And then you have Albany, which is kind of a growing a rivalry across the league. Like everybody's gunning for Albany because last season, they were such a tough team to play, and they realistically are probably one of the most talented teams on paper in the league already, and they actually have probably one of the fullest rosters already to this point as well. So I think that's really going to create some interesting matchups and kind of create some interesting out of division rivalries, which is awesome. But you had mentioned off screen a little while ago that there are some matchups here on this schedule that kind of bring back some nostalgia and something that I think was very important. I mean, you bring back the AFL last season, you bring in some of these legacy teams like the Albany Firebirds, the Nashville Cats, the Orlando Predators. I mean, you kind of want to build on the rivalries and the matchups that have already happened in the past that were iconic AFL games back in the day. And I know we're the Arena Football one now, so I don't want to necessarily play off that AFL name too much there, but I think that was something that was really important. But you brought that up off camera. So what legacy games stick out to you?
Yeah, I like that term, considering the iffiness with the old league name. But yeah, legacy games is exactly it. It brings back nostalgia from the late '90s, early 2000s. Even the mid 2000s, when arena football arguably was at its peak. In its total sport history. Right off the bat, week one, I highly doubt it was ironic. And make no mistake, it was probably on purpose. Orlando and Albany right out of the gate. That is a classic matchup from back in the day. You also have a couple times throughout the season them facing off. And then you also have Nashville and Albany bringing back, just two teams that were also really big in the former league back in the early seasons. In my opinion, of not necessarily new teams, but teams that made the jump to this league for more notoriety, for more publicity. But then you also have some of these legacy teams. It's like a nice sprinkling all around. I really like the way this league and for the most part how this schedule is looking this season.
Completely agree. I mean, like you said, it's not necessarily the same exact league, but at the same time, you kind of want to use those rivalries and those past matchups as much to your advantage. So again, this is not the AFL anymore, people. We understand that, but at the same time, you still have those long-standing matchups like Orlando and Albany, which I cannot wait to see. That's always a great game to watch. And then multiple different other games, Nashville and Albany, Nashville and Orlando, Billings and Salina, Billings and Southwest Kansas. I think the fact that a lot of these teams were established in other leagues and then came over to this league, the AF1, I think that's a good thing in the sense that you already have those built-in rivalries that you don't necessarily have to manufacture, which that can be huge for a league like this when you want to get fans in the seats, you want to get eyes on the league. I think that's really important. And I think they did a very good job of trying to incorporate a lot of those matchups. Some of the games that really stuck out to me in particular, Washington at Nashville, that is a heck of a trip. And they also will face Wilkes-Barre, who's coming to them. And that's back-to-back weeks. Sorry about that. Which I thought was interesting. Obviously you can't cater to every single team when you create a schedule. There's going to be some oddities. And I think that was one of those scenarios where Washington probably looked at that and they're like, okay, so we got a little bit of an advantage over Wilkes-Barre here, but then at the same time, we turn around and we go all the way to Nashville. So that's definitely a long trip. So we'll have to see how that kind of works out for him. But one other thing that had kind of come out in terms of news recently was the hiring of Sean Leota, who was actually a guest on this show not very long ago as the offensive coordinator for the Wheeling Miners. Now he has been hired by the Wilkes-Barre football team as their head coach for the 2025 season. What are your thoughts on that?
He's a great coach and an even better person. We, like you said, we did the interview with him about this point probably like 2-3 months ago. Feels like it was just last week though. But he's just a great guy, great human being, and I'm happy for him. To go from OC to get offered a head coaching job. He's already a 2-time CIFL champion, and his head coaching resume and record 67-35. So he has a great track record. He's definitely one of the better, arena indoor football minds. And I think it was a home run hit for Wilkes-Barre.
Completely agree, and I love the fact that he's originally from Pennsylvania. In fact, I talked to him a little, off camera, obviously, since he was hired. Great dude. Honestly, cannot speak highly enough about the man. All I did was reach out and say congratulations, and he immediately was like, "I'm ready to come back on the show whenever you are." And that was just cool to hear because him and I have kind of maintained a relationship since the FCF days, and where he was kind of the head coach of the league, so to speak. So this is awesome. It's super cool to see him get his opportunity and get his opportunity close to home. I've noticed that some fans have really kind of been zeroing in on the fact that Wilkes-Barre doesn't have a team name yet. And I even kind of had a quick discussion with one of them on Twitter about the fact that they don't have a name and they need to start building hype. Well, in my mind, hiring Sean Leota, that's building hype. And maybe it is just with arena football fans who know who he is and kind of realize that he's got a very decorated background. But also I feel he builds hype because he's a local guy. He's only 4 hours away from Wilkes-Barre where he lives. He's been in Pennsylvania for a very long time. So when you look at it that way, he's going to bring fans to those games strictly off the fact that he's a Pennsylvania guy. So I think that was a really smart hire by Wilkes-Barre. And I think you could have done there's so many different coaches out there that you could have hired that would have been great hires, but they wouldn't have brought that with them. So I think that was huge for Wilkes-Barre, and I think it was really intelligent by them. So, I haven't met anybody else from Wilkes-Barre yet, but when I do, I'm going to make sure that I tell them how smart of a hire that was. And I know I'm a little biased. Again, he's been on the show before. He's somebody I've talked to quite a bit, but I think that that's a feeling that has kind of resonated throughout the arena football community. I have not heard one single person speak ill on that hire so far. But on
Honestly,
the flip side,
I would be surprised if anyone did.
As would I. And I think that's kind of a product of how he treats people. He seems to give everybody respect, at least from my experiences. And kind of he works from a point of just being a nice guy, off the field. So I think that's important as well. You're not going to hire a guy who's going to rub people the wrong way. And I think that's important when you're ultimately building the team from the scratch. So, I'm very interested to see what they end up doing with their name. If I could suggest anything to that team, I would say put it to a fan vote. And I think I know what the name would be if the fans could vote, without any limitations, and they'd probably all vote for the Pioneers name. And maybe that's what it ultimately ends up being. But at the end of the day, I think bringing the fans in that particular way is always a good way for an arena football team to kind of build up their fan base early on. Anything else you wanted to unpack on AF1 before we move on?
Nope, I'm good.
Awesome. So on the flip side of things, obviously we just discussed the fact that, Sean Leota was on the show just a couple months ago as the offensive coordinator for the Wheeling Miners. Well, now he is no longer going to be a part of the Miners in 2025. How big of a blow, or is this a blow at all, to the Wheeling Miners, knowing that Coach Rez can definitely coach offense with the best of them?
Obviously, they're going to miss Sean, but I think they're fine. Like you said, he has experience with the offense already coaching wise, so he'll probably just take over play calling duties, or unless they can find a really good fit for their team. But this is a team that played in the AL2, coming off the championship. So, they're definitely battle tested and ready. Not an ideal situation. I'm sure they're happy for Coach Leota, but I think they'll be just fine with whether they just decide to keep with what they have in house now, or if they're able to reach out and get a quote unquote last minute signing for OC to replace him.
I agree on both fronts. I've kind of alluded to it a little bit there, but Coach Rez he's very experienced coaching both sides of the ball. So I don't think it's a scenario where you're going to see him shy away from being the offensive play caller if he cannot get somebody in there that he believes is a great addition to the team. I mean, obviously it's a blow because Coach Leota is a great coach. That's the whole reason, the Wheeling Miners wanted him in that position in the first place, knowing full well that Rez can handle those duties. But at the same time, I think it's a thing that I think it's more something that we believe is a blow as fans than it really might be on, game day because of that experience that Rez has. But we'll see how they ultimately choose to proceed at the offensive coordinator position. One thing I have to say about the Miners and Coach Rez in particular is he's a very tight end guy. He knows a lot of people throughout the industry. He's been doing this for a long time. So honestly, we could see another really inspiring hire any day now. and it wouldn't shock me to say the least. I mean, they have, like I said, he's got connections everywhere with almost every city and almost every team that you can think of in one way or another. Just a couple seasons ago, he was hired by the Tulsa Oilers. So do we see one of their coaches kind of make the jump over? There's a bunch of different scenarios here that could unfold very quickly, and it will be very interesting to kind of follow along from that aspect. But one other piece of news we've kind of glossed over, and that's my fault, I should have mentioned this before we got into the schedule stuff, is the fact that Corpus Christi was a member of the NAL just a couple months back. And, very late, right before their schedule, it was announced that they would not be a part of the NAL due to some scheduling conflicts, it sounded like. But now you have them jump over and be in the AF1. So on the surface, what are your thoughts on that move for them?
I'd be interested to see what went down behind the scenes, because it was kind of, a little shocking to see them just make the move like that. Again, with their very vague excuse for leaving the NAL. And it probably not too much, but if anything, it's probably more of a we're going to build it up in the media idea, but it definitely kind of aids in that rivalry between leagues, because now, they loosely, just maybe accidentally, but loosely just poached one team from another league and got them to join theirs. So, I don't know how good or bad the blood is between them right now after that move, but yeah, it was definitely a little shocking to me. But at the end of the day, though, I'm just happy to see them still playing, because anytime a team takes quote unquote 1 year off, it's never a good thing. And unfortunately, majority of the time, it's not a 1 year leave. It's a hiatus permanently. So I'm just glad that they're still playing. And again, it does add a little bit of a potential, bad blood between them, which is always, good to spice things up for us fans.
Agreed. And yet another thing that I kind of missed with the AF1 news is the fact that two teams have mentioned that they will not be coming until 2026. So on the surface, what are your thoughts on those? I mean, we've got Stockton, which has announced they wouldn't be coming till next season, and then also Monterey. Monterey kind of struck me as an odd one. What are your thoughts on those two teams not being able to play in 2025?
Well, for Stockton, I actually like it. Because in their release, they noted they wanted to be 100% certain they could financially and from the operations standpoint, be solid and be, a charter franchise in this league. So they want to take a year off, make sure everything is 100% right, instead of just kind of roll the dice and assume they can get through, which is awesome. Because a lot of times that's not the case. That's not what happens. They just roll the dice, and then you have a team, basically having the league front the bill towards the end, which really, when it's the league, it's basically every other team getting a little bit extra taken off the top to help the overall team, that team, survive. So I do like it. It sounds like it sounds very refined, which is something that you don't unfortunately hear a lot of in this sport. Monterey. Supposedly they were kind of the same thing. They wanted to settle down, stabilize, make sure everything's good, get more marketing out for their team, all that. I think also they kind of wanted to take a year off. Again, no affiliation, just me, kind of spitballing. I think they wanted to revisit the analytics and the logistics of the traveling, since they would be in Monterey. And again, make sure that they're 100% good. You don't want to be going into week 7 or 8 and realize, your bank account is strapped. Meanwhile, you got to still rent, a charter bus or something to go to Orlando or something like that, So I think they're both great moves for both teams. It really adds to me the stability of not only those teams, but also the league, that they talked it out. And instead of rushing things and forcing things, they decided to take a step back and let's just make sure we're on guaranteed solid footing for next season. I think it's a really good look.
Yeah, I'm of the same thought, and I'm not just saying this because I'm an AF1 supporter. I know a lot of people have kind of said, "Oh, well, you're glossing over it," because I've had conversations with a couple people, on social media and whatnot. Always dangerous, conversations on social media can go left or right. You never know. But in my personal opinion, I'd rather see these teams saying, "Hey, we can't play this season because of these reasons," and, wait a year rather than try and stretch themselves in. And like you said, put extra weight on these other teams that, probably were not prepared for that extra weight to be put on them at the last minute. So, I mean, from a overall league perspective, is it a great look? Probably not. But at the end of the day, I would rather this happen beginning of the season before the season or the schedule is announced rather than, midway through the year like it happened last year. I mean, we all remember what happened last year. We went from 16 teams, I think, all the way down to 9, and that was a disaster. So, I mean, I'm glad that this is happening before they get involved, before they had much of a team signed, before these players and coaches had to travel to those cities and ultimately be told that they couldn't play. So, kudos to those organizations for realizing where they stood before the season or the schedule was announced, so it doesn't have to be, completely dramatically altered at the last second. That's always nice to see. So, on the flip side of things, one of the most stable indoor football leagues that has been around is the Indoor Football League. They're literally heading into, I believe, season 17, if I remember correctly. Sorry about that, everybody. I had a technical difficulty and my computer just died on me. Let's see if we can get everybody back in here. Continue this conversation until I can get my computer booted up. Sorry about that, TJ. I apologize.
Oh, I thought it was my Wi-Fi that went.
No, that was definitely on my end. All of a sudden, my computer just died. So I'm trying to get it booted back up as we speak. I'm using my phone for a minute, so I apologize about the weird angle here. But anyway, we had the IFL lose 3 teams. We had kind of alluded to some of the teams possibly going away earlier on this off season, and we had spoken about Sioux Falls and Frisco. One of the teams that we did not speak on was Duke City. So, I mean, on the surface, what are your thoughts about the fact that we lost 3 teams from the IFL after really they've had some of the most stable seasons in indoor football in recent memory?
Yeah, probably the biggest surprise to me was probably Sioux Falls, just because they have been, we're talking earlier, different leagues, but talking about those legacy teams, and Sioux Falls has been around forever. They've been essentially the cornerstone of the IFL since its inception, basically. So that really surprised me. Supposedly, again, a mix of arena availability and kind of readjusting the finances played a role. I was really hoping that they would be able to figure out a way to go, but again, like we said before, sometimes the best thing is to take the year off, you refigure the business motto and plan out, make sure scheduling will work, and then have it go 100% legit instead of having to kind of use bubblegum and duct tape, if you will, to make it work. Frisco, that also surprised me, just because of how stable they've been, how great they've been. They've only been around for a few years, but hey man, they already had 2 brand new sets of turf, if you will. So normally when you're a team and you got all this new stuff, all this nice stuff, and it wears off after a few years, you kind of see the writing on the wall. But for them, it was still, they were kind of like a model franchise in games, production wise, field wise, fan experience, everything. So that definitely surprised me. And Duke City, To me, man, they've had a rough go the past few years. You had that whole turf debacle where the wrong taxpayer or zip code paid for it, so they had to give it back and everything else. To me, I feel bad for them because it feels like they've been kind of behind the eight ball the whole time, even though they really have been trying their hardest. You don't really hear, at least I haven't heard personally, any negativity come out of the organization in terms of how it's run or how they do things behind the scenes. So hopefully all these teams really are just taking, a 1 or 2 year break. I believe Frisco was in the I'll say loosely the news cycle for looking for potentially either an addition to the ownership group or a new owner. So hopefully that works out for them as well. But in a perfect world, all three of these teams come back next season, or worst case by 2027. But I would definitely be very surprised if at least Sioux Falls and Frisco aren't playing as soon as after this coming season again. But again, you never know, and time will tell.
Yeah, that's something that I really am wondering about myself. I mean, like you said earlier about the AF1, it's always, kind of an iffy situation on if these teams will make it back in the leagues or in a different league or whatever, when you get these hiatuses announced. And obviously, one thing I kind of want to make sure and make very clear to all the fans watching is this is not a cheap endeavor for any one of these IFL teams. There's a lot of travel involved. You have to get arena dates set up, and sometimes that can cost extra money. And I think that was part of the issue with Sioux Falls, if I'm not mistaken. They had some arena availability issues that kind of hampered their ability to play in 2025. And then, honestly, I don't want to speak on it too much, but I believe Duke City had some stuff off the field in terms of like health issues with the ownership group that they really needed to focus on, and that's something that you never like to hear about, but. I know at the end of the day, I was a huge Duke City fan. I thought Frisco was probably one of the most stable teams I've ever watched. So to see some of this is it's quite shocking, to be honest. But at the same time, like I said, arena football is not a cheap endeavor. A lot of times these teams are not turning a profit. They're actually losing money year after year. And a lot of these owners are doing it for their passion for the sport. And so that's one thing we all got to keep in mind. At the end of the day, it is a business. So if the business is not operating in the black, then you have to wonder how long these teams can maintain. And I think that was a big thing with Frisco in particular. I think that's why they started to look into the sale. The Germains, I think ultimately at the end of the day, they'll probably have some sort of team at some point. They're very ingrained in the IFL at this point. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they actually own the league office, or maybe it's they own the rights or to the name or something like that. I'd have to go back and look, but I know they were a very prominent part of the IFL, so it's something that to kind of keep an eye on moving forward that could be a good thing ultimately in the long run. Maybe we get another solid team ownership group in there, or it could be a bad thing. Maybe ultimately it means the Germains are slowly moving their way out of IFL, although I would find that very unlikely. And then as far as Sioux Falls goes, I mean, that's one of the longest running arena or indoor football teams in any league. And it was kind of jarring, to say the least, when we first started hearing the news that they may not be able to play in 2025. And here it comes to fruition, and they ultimately end up losing Duke City as well. So, I mean, these were three of the more established teams in any of these leagues. And right now, heading into 2025, they're gone. But at the same time, with Fishers coming in, ultimately the IFL stays at 14 teams. They're still, the biggest indoor football league that's in existence right now. So I mean, I don't think it changes a whole lot for the IFL from a outside perspective. But at the same time, I mean, those are some three solid franchises that I'm sure the league is not thrilled that they ended up losing, especially given the fact that the last couple seasons they've done a really good job of bringing in stable franchises when it comes to expansion. Whether you're talking about the San Antonio Gunslingers, the Jacksonville Sharks, Fisher Freight, which looks like it could be one of the best startup teams that we've watched in a long time in terms of operationally. but ultimately at the end of the day, you kind of just have to roll with the punches. And it's one of those scenarios where, hey, you really can't force these team owners to come back. And like we said before, you'd rather them announce this now than struggle and not finish the season, like the Louisville Extreme a couple of years ago that when they had to just kind of bail out at the last second there. So it's definitely something that I don't think anybody wanted to see. But at the end of the day, it's something that unfortunately happens, fairly regularly in indoor football.
That's not funny.
But anyway, we're going to go ahead and move on to the NAL. I'll see if I can't get the schedule pulled up here in a minute when my computer comes back on. But, or sorry, not NAL, TAL. My fault. Forgetting where we're at the point. That computer shutting off kind of threw me for a minute there. But the TAO has announced some rather big news, which I thought was very interesting. Last season, they played six-man football, and it was a unique brand in the term that everybody was an eligible receiver. So you could have literally 5 guys out there running routes while the quarterback was standing by himself trying to evade pressure from the one pass rusher. So I think from what I've heard, it sounds like that 7th guy is going to be a designated center for the offense, and I'm curious to see how the rules reflect that on the defensive side. I haven't heard much about how it's going to be viewed on that side of the ball. Can you now rush 2 people? That's going to be a huge thing to kind of pay attention to. What are your thoughts?
For me, it seems pretty interesting. It'll add an extra depth to their game. Again, it is unique. It's not true arena football, but it's kind of like its own battle. But I like the center. If anything, they, a defensive tackle, lined up one-on-one, and, whoever wins that battle, if the defensive tackle is able to win that battle, is he able to then also add pressure with the additional rusher? Because that would be a cool new way to watch the game all in itself. Honestly, I would probably be more into the quote unquote O-line D-line battle than the actual receivers running down the field. That would just be a cool one-on-one matchup. You usually don't see that unless you're in practice. So that'd be pretty cool to see. It'll definitely add more depth to it, though. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see exactly how it all works out. I mean, I got to be real honest with you. I think me and everybody else that watches indoor football and is used to that 8-man look, it was unique to watch the 6-man football. And sometimes I don't want to say it in a bad way, but it seemed like it was a little bit of a gimmicky look when you have, 5 receivers and only 6 guys on the field. But at the same time, I think it created some very unique offenses. It created a very unique way of building rosters, which can be a huge challenge, especially when most of these coaches came from traditional 8-man football. So it was awesome to kind of watch these coaching staffs evolve and adapt as the season went on and get better because, at the end of the day, the team that won the championship was probably the most unlikely winner by the end of the season. But it's something that I felt was fun to watch, at the end of the day. So now we get to, basically a whole new view on football once again from the TAL, and you kind of wonder at what point do we, watch them stop having to reinvent the wheel every year. And I don't mean that in a bad thing. I mean, I feel like this created intrigue for me. I know I'm going to be paying really close attention because of the fact that they changed such a large rule, and I want to see how that kind of works out. But at the same time, it's interesting to see 2 years in a row they've used 2 different iterations of indoor football that we haven't ever really seen before. So I mean, I think that's something that we have to kind of watch and keep an eye on going forward because this is going to create a very interesting season for the TAL. And they've got some interesting teams coming in. I still have a lot of questions about Hot Springs, which has seemingly not announced much yet. Whereas, Eau Claire has announced their head coach, they've announced their GM, they've announced all these different things that are kind of getting them off the ground pretty quickly. I know they've basically got a full roster built, just from talking to their coach. So, I mean, it's a scenario where I think, you definitely have some questions about Hot Springs, but at the same time, the TAL has done a really good job of bringing in stable ownership groups and stable teams. So I've got faith that they did the same with Hot Springs, but there's definitely some questions there. Um, what are your thoughts on that scenario? And then also, I know we've talked about it before, but all the things coming out of UClair as well.
Yeah, it does kind of make it seem like, are they doing anything behind the scenes? Or it kind of feels like one day we're just gonna, they're just gonna post and they're just gonna like roster dump everything all at once, just surprise everybody. Which hey, some teams do, and it is kind of like a shocker to everybody, kind of send shockwaves a little bit. But yeah, I'm more of the traditional, keep the fans, updated as we go, slow and steady. So it's a little bit against what I would do if I was in that situation. But hey, I'm not employed by him, so at the end of the day, my opinion doesn't matter on that. But really, to me, the whole TAL as in general is just a really interesting just league concept. You got these teams coming in, like you said, like, UClair coming in and stuff. And, you just have all these, just these kind of like cartoony logos, I don't want to say, I'll say funny in terms of like eye catching, not in a negative way, but all these kind of like funny off the wall names. It's like you said, not in a bad way, but it is eye catching. It's gimmicky. It's definitely maximizing kind of like free marketing, if you will, because, you say, oh yeah, you go into the Jammers game. People are going to look up on Google who the Jammers are because they're like, what is this? I've never heard of this before. So I just think really the league itself is kind of like its own best marketing tool. And, I just wish, again, certain teams, would just be a little bit more slow and steady with the information instead of just potential, dump after everything's all said and done, because fans like to stay informed. If it's definitely something we learned from last year's Arena Indoor World, it's fans like easy access to games, and they like to be updated on the regular basis.
Agreed. And I actually misspoke. I forgot, and this is on me, that the Jammers are now called the Axemen, the UClair Axemen. So I apologize for leading you astray as well. So that was another big piece of news that kind of came out. They rebranded as the Axemen, which I don't mind that name at all. The logo stayed fairly similar, so that's also good as well. Like you said, it's kind of a, man, I say cartoony, and like it almost, I don't want to use that word because it sounds like I'm trying to disparage the teams, but like you said, it's like it's a marketing tool in itself. You come out with these really unique kind of off the wall logos, and it realistically has worked to generate buzz on its own, in which, I mean, you really can't say that about most teams because, don't get me wrong, I love the Sioux Falls Storm, I love the Southwest Kansas Storm. A lot of those teams and leagues, they have similar names, names that you've heard before, names that were maybe team names in the past and stuff like that. So when you're a new league like the TAL that doesn't necessarily have the historic teams that you can kind of build on, you need to catch attention somehow. And I think they did a really good job of picking names, logos, locations, all these things that are really important for these teams to get off the ground and kind of build a groundswell of support in their individual locations. So that's one thing that I really think is smart. They've also done a great job of considering travel, when they brought these teams in. So I think we talked about this in the past where, basically all these teams are right off a single highway. And so a lot of this travel is by bus, but at the same time, it's not terrible travel. You essentially have a straight shot between one team and the next. And, you might have to get off the beaten path a little bit, but it's not terrible. And then I think another piece of news that we have not discussed yet is Kansas City is actually switching venues. I have not heard where they're going to play in 2025 yet, and that's on me again for not necessarily researching this a whole ton or talking to the coaching staff yet. But that's going to be an interesting thing to follow because I know towards the end of the year, a lot of people had good and bad things to say about the fact that they had an outdoor game. And then, some other scenarios with their arena where it kind of left it unavailable for them to play in. So that's something to track and watch as we go forward, because obviously, it's always a big deal when you move venues, but it could also end up being a good thing. So um, I guess we'll see. Only time will tell with the TAL. There's a bunch of stuff going on, and it's still definitely piquing my curiosity as an arena football fan. And I mean, if you haven't watched a game, I highly recommend you go back and check out their YouTube channel. All their games are still up from last season, so that's something that's I really really recommend if you have not watched them, because it is a unique brand of football. It's something that really caught a lot of attention and kind of caused a little bit of it's caused some waves in the arena football world, for lack of a better term here, last season. So that's definitely something that we can kind of track and follow, and we will continue to cover the TAL as well. It's been a lot of fun kind of getting to know these teams and learning more about their staffs and their players and stuff like that. And even though it was an upstart league and they really can't um, maybe compete financially with some of these other teams that are established. They had a lot of talent last year. In fact, there were some players there that had NFL on their resume, and that's always interesting to see. And I think we're going to continue to see that as things go. Um, Man, I think I basically have covered more or less everything we had planned on, except for the IFL schedule, because I can't get it pulled up at the moment. So that might be another thing for next episode. Are there any topics that you wanted to get out there and talk about before we move on and call it a day?
Uh, don't believe so. Just sorry, TAL about the Axeman name, but hey, that shows you did such good marketing because I still have the jammers in my head. See, I mean, now, nah, just I can't wait, man. It's I mean, obviously outdoor football, NFL's going on, but we're getting there, guys. We're getting there. It's almost the holiday season. As soon as that New Year's calendar comes around, arena and indoor season is a short time away.
Completely agree, and honestly, I can't wait. I kind of wish some of these leagues would either move their season up or push their season back a little bit, and they would stretch out the arena football season. We've got the MAFL, which has kind of, obviously kind of become a big part of Shady Sports Network here. If you have not caught that, we've broadcasted a few of their games now, and that's a partnership I look forward to bringing it back, in 2025 and beyond. But they have their championship game and playoffs coming up here pretty quick, and then they also have a all-star game, which I think is a unique approach. That's something that I really haven't seen done much at this level, and I think players are really kind of taken to it in a good manner. So don't want to spend a ton of time bringing that into this, but what are your thoughts on that? Have you ever seen a scenario where an arena football league does a all-star game like that?
The only time I can really recall, I believe, back in back in the heyday, in like the early to mid 2000s, I think the original AFL had an All Star game for a couple seasons, I think. But even that, kind of went away after a few years. So it really is cool. I think if nothing else, that's like what some other leagues do. Not necessarily the All-Star game, but just like the All-Pro or All Arena teams and stuff like that. I think it's really awesome. It's really good. Just it gives accolades to guys for their play on the field, and at this level, that's something awesome to put on their resume to try and get to a higher league, to try and get to the UFL or the CFL or even to a camp in the NFL. It's just really good. And if nothing else, man, it helps their confidence, and an all-star game itself gives fans, another game to watch, not only another game, but a game with the best of the best. So I think it's all around good. Anytime there's more football, to me, it's a good thing.
Absolutely, and that actually happens just after the new year turns, so that's going to be interesting to see how their season kind of carries out over into 2025, which I like. Kind of bridges the gap a little bit there from the end of their regular season, their playoffs and everything, into the 2025 season with the rest of these leagues that we were just speaking about. Honestly, like you said, any more football is good football in my personal opinion. So, looking forward to that game as well as the playoffs and the championship game coming up quick. So definitely make sure you like, comment, subscribe on Shady Sports Network and continue to help us grow so we can get you even more coverage of leagues like that and maybe even some more live sports. On that note, stick right here. We're going to have a live soccer game coming within the next couple hours here. And don't ask me to remind you which teams they are because I'm not much of a soccer fan at the moment. So we'll see if they can't change my mind later on today. But we've got a lot of stuff coming at you. So if you haven't done so already, make sure you're liking, you're commenting, you're following us on all your favorite social media platforms. You're going to get a ton of content. But as far as the live games, that is going to be a strictly YouTube thing. So make sure you're subscribing on YouTube. We're at, I believe, 1,738 subscribers. We're on the push to get 1,800. And you can do your part simply by clicking the subscribe button, turning on those notifications, and anytime you have a moment, come tune in with us. We've always got content coming out, whether it's NFL or it's about indoor football, UFL, CFL. We've got basically every major league, every paying league for the most part covered on our network, and we're looking to improve our coverage. So if you have any suggestions, make sure you DM me or hit me up on any platform. I'm always down to have a conversation about how we can improve, what you would like to see, stuff like that as we continue to grow. TJ, man, another great episode. I apologize about the issues there in the middle, but I appreciate you always being here with me every time we do this show. You've been honestly one of the best additions that we brought into Shady Sports, and I'm really excited about the future with you and everybody else.
Thank you, man. It's just an honor to be on all these different shows and get to talk football, man. I just love it. Made a lot of new friends too here, so it's definitely been a good thing mutually.
Glad to hear it. And on that note, you can catch TJ tomorrow morning on NFL Pregame Report. He is one of the most stable members of that show as well. So honestly, like I said, he's quickly become a very valuable member of our team. And, definitely make sure you follow him at TJ Shady Sports on Twitter. Or you can follow him on Facebook as well. And he's always got, good takes and stuff coming out as well. So make sure you're following all these different content creators we have on Shady Sports. That's a big thing that we're trying to do here. We would like all these guys to kind of build up their own following and be able to kind of carry that into whatever they choose to do later on in their career. We've had quite a bit of success of people finding their little niche in the football world, and we hope that that's something we can continue as a network and, overall in the football world in general. I mean, we're all in this for a passion. So, let's find let's get in where we fit in. Let's put it that way. So appreciate everybody who tuned in. Definitely have watched that counter kind of climb as we went, even though we had the computer issues midway. So I appreciate everybody who, stopped by and decided to listen to us talk about indoor football for a little while here. And really appreciate you all tuning in. Hopefully you guys stick with us for the rest of this weekend because we got a lot of content coming at you. Like I said, soccer game here in a little bit. We've got the interview with Kendrell Ellison, the coach of the Munich Ravens from the ELF, coming up with Michael Washington hosting. Later on tonight, we've got NFC Beast, which we recorded last night. So that is a pre-recorded show, but we always like the comments, interaction that you guys bring with us. And then tomorrow morning, NFL Pregame Report. And then you can finish off your weekend with Shady Sports Fantasy Reports hosted by LeCedric Green and Justin. I'm not going to try and pronounce your last name. I apologize, buddy. I don't want to butcher it. But both of those guys are incredibly knowledgeable about fantasy sports. So if you're struggling like I am this season, I strongly suggest you tune in and get some of their advice because both of them do a lot of research every week to bring you 2 episodes every week to kind of give you the start and sit questions and then kind of review the week that was. So on that note, we're going to go ahead and call it a day. Appreciate everybody, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
I'm a game changer. I'm a game changer. I'm a game changer. game changer. I'm a game changer.